Hello everyone, my name is Peril and welcome to my channel. This video is a little later than I intended for it to be, but here we are. Artfight has officially ended. The results aren't out yet, but I hope everyone had a really good time this year. I did, and I got a lot more done than I thought that I would, which is pretty motivating for me. To celebrate my very first art fight, I'll be showing you the piece that has definitely secured the win for Stardust. Trust me, this is why we will definitely win. So for my final attack, I wanted to try my hand at a mass attack, an attack that involves multiple characters. I had the idea that I would draw a tavern scene with a bunch of tieflings, which is a fantasy race seen in Dungeons and Dragons. Think of a demon type race with horns, tail, and colored skin. That's a tiefling. Since I was on vacation and therefore I left my art supplies behind, I used what I had to create a very detailed concept sketch that looks like this. I really have no clue what's going on now that I look at it. Basically, I wanted a scene where there were around 6 different characters all interacting in some way. 3 in the front and a couple in the back with a loner on the side. All I had to do now was decide who to include. My first choice was a given, as I can't pass up an opportunity to involve my own tiefling, Saronithria. However, I didn't just add her for no reason. In this piece, she'll be interacting with an OC named Bane, whose creator, the party cleric, had previously drawn an attack with the both of them. This mass attack was a perfect opportunity to enact my revenge. For the remaining characters, I scrolled through the tiefling tag on Artfight in order to find a diverse range of tieflings. Here's who I came up with. For the third character up front, I decided on this one, whose name is something I probably can't pronounce, so I'll just call her Urs. She's created by Buichiri, and I think she has an incredible design. I really adore her palette, and I think her hair is such a beautiful focal point that I knew I wanted to include. My next choice was an OC named Percival by Tic Tacky, who has a very pretty shade of blue as their skin tone. Paired with them is Kieran by Strawberry Swirl, who contrasts nicely with a shade of red. As for the loner in the back, I decided on Samson by Mark DiMacro, who, as you can see, would fit the role perfectly. Now that we have our roster, let's begin. First of all, doing a background like this was a pretty daunting task. I haven't drawn a scene in actual years, and my old ones were questionable, to say the least. I want to very quickly remind everyone that I am not a professional at all and that I am self-taught, so the way I go about this is probably incorrect. Starting off, I did not use a grid. I don't know how to use a grid, so I eyeballed it and came up with this sort of view coming from the front counter of the tavern looking into the back corner where we have a nice wall along the side, some windows, some lanterns falling from the sky, or hanging from the ceiling, my bad, and a little table in the back where some conversation will be happening. I also went ahead and added some props to make it look more interesting and more lived in, I guess. We have some food, some drinks, and a couple in the back as well. I also went ahead and did a sort of practice run using a reference to sort of get an idea of the kind of lighting that I wanted in here. I wanted it to be dark around the outer edges of the piece and nice and warm where the lanterns are. And I wanted some cold lighting to come from the windows as well because of the moonlight. I also blocked in the colors to get an idea of the shades that I wanted to see. I later realized that I actually can't use this as lighting because overlays don't really work like that, but it was a good reference to use in the future. I then went ahead and cleaned up the lines that we had. I made sure the perspective was right and basically made things a lot cleaner. I didn't make it super clean. I wasn't super focused on that because this was taking a lot of time. I just wanted the shapes to all be clear and for it to be easy for me to fill in later. For the back wall, I thought it would be cool if it wasn't wood and if it was this like cobblestone texture instead. So I went ahead and kind of blocked in the rock shapes and decided that it would look like stone if I rendered it later and had the background be like, I guess it would be the medieval equivalent of grout. So is that what it's called? But I use this blocking in technique and I think it turned out really nicely later on. Once the background was fully lined, I went ahead and did the flat coloring for the background before starting on the people. I did a dark brown for the things that are on the floor and in the background, and a lighter brown for the things that are more up front. It was important because since they're all made of wood, I didn't want them all to mold into each other and all look the same, especially when the line art isn't very visible when it comes to a dark color underneath. So different shades of brown allows you to convey a sense of lighting and also to make it contrast each other. With the base of the background complete, I could finally start on the characters. I started with the people in the back, and I used a less detailed style when it comes to characters that are farther away. There's no point in putting in a lot of detail in these characters because you'll have to zoom in to see it. So I go for a simplified style. This is where Samson, Percival, and Kieran will be sitting. Samson against the wall, and Percival having a chat with Kieran on the table. Now, Percival didn't have a lot or like anything from what I remember in their description. However, I did notice that they had the word nerd in their tag list. So I was like, okay, maybe Percival is like, I don't know, an inventor or researcher of some kind. I'm trying to think of what a medieval nerd would be like. So I just put some papers down in front of him and I was like, okay, maybe he's talking to Kieran about this new discovery, or maybe there's special interest or something like that. And Kieran is just like, okay, I don't really want to hear this right now. Um, See, I wanted to be able to portray some sense of these characters within these small, simplified versions of them in the background. Even though these are simplified versions of the characters, it is important to get down every detail. So I made sure to reference these characters closely and be able to put down every part of their design. I thought Kieran was very fun to draw, even though she's very simplified back here. I think her design is so, so cute, and I love her ponytail a lot. With the line art done, I could finally move on to the flat colors before moving on to the people in the front. Before actually laying down any colors, I tend to go ahead with one color and fill in the whole area so that it's easier for me to overlay these colors on top of that and also make sure that there are no leaks from the line art. Once that is done, I'm able to go ahead and actually color pick from the reference and overlay those colors on top of that little layer we did underneath. Once again, like I said, when it comes to the coloring, you do want to, even though it is a very simplified version of the character, you want to stay true to the reference so that even though this person's character is in the back and small and cutesy, that person is still able to look at their character and say, oh my God, they drew my character. Oh my God, they drew their earrings. Oh my God, they got all the details right. You know what I mean? So that's something I really tend to do because it's something that I would do. It's the kind of reaction I would have if someone were to draw my character. I would be not exactly critiquing it, but I would be looking to see what of the design they noticed and what of the design they didn't. Coloring them made me really happy because the whole cast of tieflings here all have very different skin tones, which is what really shows the diverse manner of Dungeons and Dragons creators and players. Even though there tends to be a set idea of what a tiefling looks like, which is, I believe, a red skinned tiefling, many people have their own interpretations and come up with their own colors and characters. And you can see all the different versions of tieflings that people have come up with here, with varying versions of tails, varying looks in their eyes, varying horns, varying ears, varying skin tones. It's all really nice. Now we can finally move on to the people in the front who will have my more detailed art style. I started off with Urze here, and I was kind of unsure of what to do with her pose. The other two, they were simple enough because they already had a sort of quote unquote established friendship. Urze, I see that she is not a talker, I believe. She's not someone to be socializing and getting along with the more outgoing and eccentric characters that's Sorrow and maybe even Bane is. So I had her kind of just curiously watching them, maybe resting her hand on her, oh sorry, resting her head on her hand as she looks over, maybe in disturbance, maybe she's curious. I don't know. She had a kind of neutral expression that I almost mimicked from her original reference. Maybe she's taken some interest in what's going on over there. Maybe she's like, oh, I wish they'd shut up. Up to your interpretation, I guess. Thursday's hair was very fun to do. Of course, when it comes to curls, I tend to be very simple in the line work and rely on coloring to be able to bring out the texture of the hair, and I'll show you that later on. Now, when it comes to Bane and Sorrow, I wanted them to have a very cute interaction here. I don't know much about Bane's character, but the creator did say that they imagined Bane and Sorrow getting along very well. So the interaction that they have here is Sorrow kind of holding up these paper dolls. You know those paper doll link chain things where they're all like holding hands? She has that in her hands, but they're all they're all beheaded, which is kind of a callback to something that happened in her campaign, a reference that really only I would understand, but all of the people that she's holding are beheaded, and it's kind of like this quirky thing. She's like, "Oh, look at this craft that I made," and it's kind of like this creepy, like they're all beheaded dolls. Like, oh, that's weird. But Bane here is giving her a very enthusiastic thumbs up. She looks very supportive of whatever Sorrow is telling her. So, do I know how Bane would actually react to that? No, but my Bane, my interpretation of Bane is approving of this, and I think the creator assumed that they were gossiping. And hey, that's fine too. They're just having a good time here, and Urze is questioning what's going on. Now, as we do Sorrow's line art, I do want to talk about her a little bit. I would love to do more Dungeons and Dragons content on my channel. It's one of my favorite things ever. And Sorrow is one of my very, very first characters, and it's my very first character of whom I've played a full campaign with. Her proportions did end up being a little bit off here. I think her head was too big and her hand was too small, but I feel like it doesn't look too out of place overall, and it was fine. Sorrow is a very sweet, enthusiastic, and she has a few screws loose as well, but she's very nice, she's very kind, and she's out here to make friends and live life and adventure and see sights. And I guess I won't go too much in depth to her character. Maybe it's for another video, maybe it's for a more D&D centered video. I don't want to nerd out while people are trying to enjoy the art. But Sorrow is one of my favorite characters of all time, and I love her dearly, and I would love to talk about her some more sometime. Now we move on to the very simple rendering, and I do mean simple rendering, especially for the characters in the back. Here I did what I always do, which is I take a darker shade of the flat color and I layer it on top, putting it where I believe shading would be or where I think there would be warmth in the skin. For the characters in the back, since they are farther and not really in vision, I didn't even blend it out. I just put down the color and it looked well enough. I did forget a few details on Percival, so I made sure to add that in really quickly before continuing. My rendering process is also when I will add details to the character that I may have missed, like I did with Percival. Sorrow has a bunch of these pale blue stitches that run across her body, so I went ahead and added that in. I believe Bane had some freckles all across her face and her hands and her tail. Added that as well, and this very cool red marking that she has on her face. I went ahead and added that too. When it comes to a textured hairstyle like this, it is the rendering process where I like to add that detail. So I did use the original reference a little bit here, added some shadow and erased parts of it to give the illusion that there are curls on top of each other. Similarly, I did the same thing with lighting to accentuate some more curls. Now we move on to background rendering, which I will not lie, I was very scared for this part, but it was actually very fun. I had a reference on the side, of course. I don't drop props very often, but a reference is always good to have. I added the froth on the beer with some detailing of these berries. That was very fun to do. And the wine glass was also kind of daunting. Through art class, I have kind of referenced glasses before, so I had a little bit of experience with it, but I still think it ended up pretty nicely, I think, based on the one time I've drawn a glass. Doing clear shiny objects is very difficult to emulate. Once again, I'm not a professional, I'm not a tutorial, so I couldn't tell you what I did here. I do think the props turned out really nicely here. I'm very happy with them. They look great. I don't draw props very often, of course. I don't draw scenes very often. So, guys, when you're trying something new, always reference, because it can bring amazing results. Look at this bottle here. Very nice. Now we move on to the last bit of the rendering process where I attack the tables and the floor and the walls. I added light where the light would hit and dark where the creases of the wood are, and I followed that for the floor as well. The table in the back was, again, simplified, so I would just add very harsh shadows where light wouldn't touch at all. Um, Bring attention to the props that are there and the people that are there by adding shadows underneath them as well. I think the wood, like the wood pillars in the back, were probably my favorite part. I liked rendering them a lot. It was very fun to blend out. Just like the table, I add light where light would touch. Since there are lanterns right in front of them, a lot of the pillar would be bright and there would be darkness in the sides of the pillar. I really hope that this was able to emulate roundness in the pillar because I wanted it to look like round tree trunks rather than like rectangles of wood. The stones were also very nice to render. I just, once again, if there's a theme here, you darken up where the shadow wouldn't touch, so it would be the creases in between the stones and against the wall, and put a lighter shade where light would touch, so the stones that are nearest to the lanterns, or the stones that have parts of it that are facing the lanterns. Finally, we start with the part of the rendering process that I am least confident about. Now, the part that I showed you before where we darken places and lighten places does help with the lighting and the shadows, but I go ahead and add in some harsher shadows to further serve this environment because there are light sources all over the place. Light is coming in all kinds of directions, so there will be shadows of varying harshities. I don't think that's the word. I guess opacities, I should say. Then I added some light with an add layer, a nice glow around the lanterns, and an additional glow on top of people's heads and across surfaces in the area. I think my favorite part of the lighting would have to be the pale glow that comes from the windows. It's not super obvious to see because it's only really across the floor, which is covered by Bane mostly, but I think it was a really nice touch and adds some nice color to the scene. Some final notes I want to point out for scenes that have multiple characters, for example, the characters are in the front and there are characters in the back, I add an overlay of black across the space that is in the back to kind of bring more separation between them. And I also added a nice orange overlay layer to bring warmth to the entire piece because overall, the whole room outside of the canvas would also have lanterns hanging in it. And here is the end product of our lovely Tiefling Tavern party. I am very, very happy with how this turned out and very proud of myself because, like I might have mentioned, this is my first time drawing a scene in many years, and this is also my first time drawing more than two characters in the same piece. So, lots of achievements here. I hope the end product is very satisfying for the creators that are featured and also for the viewer, that is you. That is it for this video. If you enjoyed my art fight series and would be interested in future art videos and other types of content, please do subscribe. I would really appreciate it. If you'd like to follow me across other platforms or support me through commissions or donations, those can also be found in the description of this video. Thank you very much for sticking with me, and I'll be seeing you all next time. Bye!